Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Conversations with Dene, your family law and wellness needs. I am Dene Matthews. I am the owner of the Dunn Matthews Law Firm, which is a boutique law firm in Metro Atlanta, where we practice domestic litigation, custody, child support, legitimations, everything involving your domestic needs. And I started this live series and podcast as a way to intertwine your family law matters, everyday things with, the struggles of life's things that life throws at us, things that life blesses us with, and how we kind of go about our day-to-day lives as family law matters and things strike us when we least expect it. And so today we are going to be talking about estate planning with attorney Nicola Robinson of SR Law Group. Nicola has been an attorney for quite some time. She first started out with doing some trial litigation, and eventually she started SR Law Group, her and her partner, and they are located in Douglasville, Georgia. She most notably on litigation surrounding the events of September 11th, 2011 is what the bulk of her history involves outside of the estate planning arena. Then she shifted gears to continue representing major insurance companies throughout the state of Georgia. So in 2009, that's when she kind of shifted over to estate planning. And then a lot of people in her family, etc., started to have things happening in their lives. And so she is now where she is. And I'll let her explain a little bit more about all of that. She's better to do it than I am. So welcome, Nicola, everybody.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be here today.
Thank you for joining us. I'm so glad you could join us. So tell everybody, other than the little spiel that I kind of gave in my haste and my tiredness of the day, we were talking about how tired we both are from the legal world day. Tell everybody really who you are, what you do, how you kind of came to be where you are.
Sure. So, like she said, I am Nicola Robinson, co-owner of the SR Law Group, which our firm really does estate planning, elder law, and probate matters. So it's everything to do with wills or property that has been left to other individuals and is now tied up in court. And I kind of transitioned to this, like you said, I was a litigator and started out as a litigator and thought I was going to live out my life in court. But once my grandmother passed away, my grandmother owned a lot of land that had been in her family for several generations. And my father was the oldest of her 5 children, but he was not her biological child. And so when she passed away, it became fighting and discord because some of his siblings felt that he should not have received any of the land. And so it turned into a really, really sad situation because now you saw just hurt feelings between family members. I know my grandmother and I would want to believe that that is not the legacy she would have wanted to leave behind, but it has very much impacted stories of my grandmother because there's still so many people in our family that are not speaking as a result of this. And this happened several years ago. And so now you see multiple generations that are not in communication and they're not close because the previous generations fell out over this. And so I transitioned to really make sure that I could help other families not deal with that. Because if I could go back and really like get my grandmother to understand the importance of putting everything in writing, having a will, like it would have saved our family so much heartache and drama. So my goal now is to really just help other families and hopefully help them to organize everything and be able to make things so much easier on their loved ones in the event there is either a medical emergency or in the event that they do actually pass away. Well, that's me in a nutshell.
Okay. And I like people, I believe people always think that we won't be that family.
Oh yeah. Oh, I do that all the time. That
It
is
won't happen to us.
I get people come in and they say, well, oh yeah, my kids, they get along great. It's fine. That would never happen. And I'm just like, you know what? My dad and his siblings got along great too. Like, never would have seen this coming. And
Yeah.
I tell people, if your kids showed you who they were when they were small. If you left the room and they were not sharing their toys, I
That's right.
promise you, when you pass on, they probably not gonna share these toys.
I
So
have never thought of that.
so why even tempt them? Like, why even put that there for them to just try to figure it out or to spend time trying to see if they're gonna be able to share? Let's just put something in writing. Let's give them the direction so that they don't even have to like waste the energy trying to say, well, you got more, well, mama liked you more, or daddy didn't like you, and there's this other child over here and all that, because I see it all. I promise you.
Wow. And if you as a parent weren't able to sit back and see them resolve on their own, you always had to interject. But you won't be here to interject.
Won't be here. You won't be here.
I have never ever thought about it like that. The same way in which you saw them as children, they're the same people. At the holidays, they kind of probably fight and stuff a little bit too. But
Yeah.
for the most part, they may get along just as they did as children. So you have to really think about that. That is so interesting.
Because the reality is no two people share a brain. And so you saying, oh, they'll get along fine. And they probably do. They probably get along swell right now because they're not forced to make decisions together. Most of the times I deal with older clients. So their children are older. So they live separate lives. You got a daughter in California, you got a son that's, maybe down in Florida. So they get along great because they may see each other a couple of times a year. But when you're now forced to make decisions about mom's home or whether mom needs to go into a nursing home, that's when you see that they're like, oh, we can't figure this out together because they have different perceptions of what should happen. And I always use the example of a home. You got 3 kids. You decide, I'm not going to do anything. All 3 kids inherits the home. One wants to live in it and they feel like they're entitled because it was their mama's house. One is like, it's a great renter's market right now, so you need to get out so we can go ahead and get some of this rental money. And the other one was like, no, this is the best sales market. We need to put that thing on the market, split this money 3 ways. Well, now you have complete gridlock and nobody's paying the taxes. They all decide, well, if you feel so strongly about it, you pay the taxes. So
No
now,
taxes, no lights,
no,
no water, no
training it.
cutting the grass, no anything.
And
Everything's just going downhill.
And that's when you see a lot of times you'll see properties that are just going downhill. And it's usually after somebody has died because the family is caught up in their feelings and fighting, and nobody's actually tending to the property. And so you'll see eventually the city will step in, eminent domain, they'll take over it.
And
So
somebody else's treasure for $1,000
yes, it
at the
happens
tax sale.
all the time.
And now your family's house is gone.
And usually, the home is the biggest asset. That is something that the family could have helped another generation with, whether it be providing someone a place to live or selling it and then giving them seed money for them to be able to do some other things. So you really want to think long and hard about, if something happened to me, where would this home go? Who would be the one that's in charge of taking care of it? And I tell people sometimes, if you have one house, 3 kids, maybe you give the house to the one needs a home, or you leave the life insurance to the other one. Like, equal is not necessarily equitable. And so you want to make sure that they all have something. So maybe the house is worth 100,000. You leave 100,000 life insurance to the other child. And so they both have walked away with something. So it's something you got to be creative. You got to really think through, what would I ultimately want to see happen if I was not here?
That's a really good idea. Not necessarily that every single thing has to be split down the middle, just the same as I deal with in a divorce and people want to divide every single little thing. It's not necessary. If
Right.
you take a little bit from here and you're still going to have the same by you keeping this, it works out the same. They kind of level off. So I like the idea of being able to just still make everybody feel whole in a way. Like you haven't left them with nothing.
Absolutely.
And so I just want to remind you, if you're watching, I know I have somebody watching right now on Instagram. If you're on Facebook or YouTube, excuse me, or LinkedIn, make sure you give StreamYard permissions to show your name. If you want us to know who you are, ask questions of Nicola if you have them. I'm sure she will be more than willing to answer. And I'll also pay attention to the Instagram questions as well. So I know, like, when you first started talking, you talked about like if you land in the hospital and obviously you can't make your own decision. So I know some people say, well, I don't want a will because I don't have enough or whatever. So let's put those people to the side for a second. We'll get back to that kind of thought process.
I can already address those people because it's quick and easy. If you are over the age of 18 and you own something, you probably need a will. It's very few people that I can honestly say, absolutely, you don't need it. And they do exist, but that's because we've done some other types of planning to make sure that their assets transition. But anybody else, you probably need it.
You need one. Even the simplest of simple.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be this complex, scary thing. It's not.
It's really not. People usually leave my office and say, oh, that was fun. And I'm like, well, what did you think it was going to be?
I thought it was going to be horrible. I'm going to be dead today. Like, no.
And I really need to put that out there. People say, well, I don't want to talk about death because that's going to make it come faster. I talk about the lottery every day.
You didn't want it yet, did you? You're still working.
I'm going to just say that myth is a myth. Like, that's how it is. I have never seen any scientific proof to say doing your estate planning or talking about what would happen to your assets after you pass away is going to cause you to pass away.
It is not going to cause
it. This is the Mythbuster. That is not true.
You like that show, Mythbusters?
My kids used to watch it. I haven't seen it in years.
I love Mythbusters. Okay? I love me some Mythbusters. Now, some of the stuff I'm like, now, was that real or not? I'm not sure. Did you really do that or not? But we can definitely say that you getting a will, it's a myth that you're going to die later. But what we can say is one day,
you will.
You will. That's the one guarantee that we have, is that you will. And so you want to make sure that you are doing the things that are setting not just your family up for success, but every generation thereafter, in my opinion. No, so those people who, they've got the will, or maybe they don't, what's the options available to them who, when you talk about you may end up in the hospital, what are those things that they can do to make sure that when they do end up in the hospital, things are still taken care of?
So I'm glad you asked. So I tell people there's really three phases of life. There's living, you out here YOLO, having the best time, and then there's death. And that's usually when people start thinking about me, like, okay, I need to do death. But the reality is there's a piece in the middle, and that's called sickness. And you see the baby boomers are retiring. They're here. They're living much longer, but almost inevitably, they're going to end up in sickness before they actually transition on to death. And so when that phase of life, when you are talking about strokes and heart attacks, maybe even cancer, you want to make sure you have a power of attorney in place. That is by far probably more important than the will, quite honestly, because you need the power of attorney to allow somebody else to step in your shoes, to talk to the banks, to talk to your insurance, to talk to, if you have stocks and bonds and commodities. They really take on the day-to-day of managing your finances. When I was, I don't know, probably in my teens, there was one of my the neighbor of my mom's best friend, all his stuff was sitting outside. And I was like, is he getting evicted? Like, what's happening? And I didn't really understand back then, because I knew he had been in the hospital. Well, imagine he was in the hospital fighting for his life, but nobody was paying that mortgage.
Oh my goodness.
So he was being evicted. He was being put out. It was, yeah. And I was like, how sad is that, to recover from some type of serious illness and to realize that what you left behind is not going to be there.
Oh my gosh. And that's so horrible. But if the right things were in place.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I can't access your bank account even if I'm listed as the beneficiary on your bank account or something, I can't access it. I can't do anything. And most people in middle class America aren't going to have the resources to go and help their family member out for months on end or weeks on end.
Right. It's not like I'm gonna say, well, I'll just pay your mortgage, Dene, until you get yourself
Come
back.
on, girl.
I would love to, but yeah, I'm gonna need access to your funds so that I
Right.
can go ahead and do that for you until you get back to where you can take over yourself. So it is definitely that document that allows children of aging parents to assist them with their finances, or for somebody that gets sick or has a stroke, because the reality is you can be any age for that to happen, and allow somebody else that you really trust to be able to do that for you.
Okay. So we have a question on Instagram. Can a will supersede the law? For example, a wife wills everything to her children, but when she passes away, she's still married.
Okay, so this question is a little bit state specific. So depending
This
on where
person's
the
in
person.
Georgia.
Okay, so in Georgia, it's a little tricky because we have what's called year support. So even if that spouse gave everything to her children, we'll say her sons, and her intent was for her husband not to be able to get anything, her husband can still file a petition for what's called year support. He has 2 years from the date that she passes away to go to the courts and essentially say, I'm going to, as the widow, as the spouse, I'm going to need enough to take care of me for at least a year past the time she passed. And so, depending on what assets she had, whether that's money in the bank accounts and he's asking for that, or he might ask for the property itself, he can do that. The courts will determine what is the appropriate amount for his year support. So, her intention might be to give everything to those kids, but the courts are going to be like, hold up, we got to give him something.
I hope that answered your question. If not, send a follow-up question. But you can't leave old husband out.
There are other ways to do more creative planning. It can be a little bit more complex, but that's where you may want to consider something like a trust. Because when you leave things in a trust, the way that it is handled does not involve court involvement. So that's something you might want to take into consideration.
So talk about that real quick, because trust passed through. I'm gonna let you say the rest. The difference between a trust and a will, and why it may be better at times for somebody to do a trust as opposed to a will.
So wills and trusts, they at the end of the day, they reach the same goal. Let's put it that way. They're both vehicles to pass your things from one generation or from one family member to the next. You do a will. Once you pass away, your family takes that will to the courts, and then the courts say, yes, this is a valid document. Yes, this person that's named in the will is the executor, and they will have the responsibility of actually executing your wishes, actually making sure things get passed to whoever you leave it to. A trust operates the same way. It is a document that says where you want your things to go at the time of your passing. The difference, though, is the trust is usually private. You don't have to go through court. You don't need a judge to say that this is, in fact, your last wishes. And it it gives the power to what's called a trustee, the person that you've put in charge of the trust, to then just go about the business of dispersing everything. They don't need court involvement at all. When would you necessarily want to trust over a will? It depends on a couple of different things. If you have considerable assets, who you want them to go to, if you don't want people in your business, if you want to do multiple generations, say you want to plan for grandkids or you want to skip a generation, then the trust will be a much better vehicle to do that. A will, like I said, is pretty straightforward, but you have the downside of a will, like I said, is a public document. Well, you have anybody that can come and object to that will and contest the will. So a lot of times you'll file the will, say that same example from the person from Instagram. She files her will that says everything to my kids. Well, her husband might file an objection and say, no, she was unduly influenced by those kids. They held a gun to her head and made her write that. Or she was so senile that she could have never, she didn't have the capacity to write a will that would have left me out because I'm her husband. So there's ways that you can challenge the will if it's a public document in open court. Trust, very rare that you ever going to get a challenge. And the reason being, family and friends don't know you did a trust. So they can't challenge something if they're not made aware of it. So usually it's the person who created the trust, the grantor, and then the trustee, the person that they put in charge of the trust. Those are usually the people who have the knowledge about what the trust has and the inner workings of the trust. And then at the time that the person who created it passes away, the trustee just goes about the job of dispersing the things based on the directions that they were given. And then usually the trust can either close out then, or if it's a generational trust, it'll continue on to the next generation.
And so, I mean, we've seen like a lot of stories. The person asked, can the children take the husband to court?
I don't ask follow up. I don't know why the children would want to take him.
I guess what this person is saying is if the husband was the only person named in the will, can the children contest the will?
Oh yeah, anybody can contest the will. Your next door neighbor can come in and say, no, she told me I was getting everything.
Anybody can contest the will.
And we see that a lot with people who pop up. Like,
yeah, I'm
children, they say mommy's baby, papa's maybe. And so these children that pop up and they're like, I was his too. So I'm gonna need a split of that. And I wasn't taken into consideration. So there's a lot of this lets people come out the woodwork.
Everybody, all your family members or potential maybe family members are gonna come out. So I know, like, we've seen all over the place, celebrities not having wills, you make all this money, what happened? But we also see, we don't really hear about it, but more of the, I guess, wealthier side of people, do you see that they use trust more than your middle class individual?
I think the short answer is yes. Typically, high net worth people use trust more, but I think that is because they tend to have better advisors in their corner. I think that middle class,
from a tax standpoint,
right. And so I think that anyone can have a trust. Like, your kids can be trust fund kids, my kids, like anyone can have a trust. There's no price point for where you would say that, okay, this is somebody that needs a trust. But I think that middle class has gone about the day-to-day of just working and accumulating and hasn't really taken the time to think about anything beyond working and accumulating. But no, I definitely want to clear that up. This is not a vehicle or a tool just for the uber wealthy. That tends to be what we see because of there's really nothing to report when you have a trust. So you don't hear about trust in the news. You hear about will contests. You hear about people not having a will. But when people do a trust and they do it right, there's nothing to hear about. And I'll give a perfect example. Maybe a year ago when Meghan Markle and Prince Harry were being interviewed by Oprah, and they were talking about like, well, where's your money coming from? And he said the trust that his mom had put in place for him. And so that's one of those things, like, but for that interview, we would have never known. She had the foresight to put a trust in place that he's benefiting from now, as well as his children. So multiple generations are able to benefit from a trust Princess Diana put in place. She's been dead
for a long time ago. In the 90s, early 90s.
Yeah, like we was young. So
don't put me on that, y'all. Okay. But so let's because I know a lot of people, like, everybody hears about the wills. They know about the wills, they just don't do it. So let's talk about the trust. If I've got $10,000, I can put that in the trust.
You can put $10,000 in the trust. You can put $2,000 in the trust. You can put $20. It really is a matter of what it is and what your goal is that you want to see. I have a lot of clients who they'll come to me and say, I just have this house, but I don't want my family tied up in court. I don't want no friction. I want to trust just to be able to pass this house. Because again, it will do the same thing the will does. It's just we take the court element out of it. So
Mhm.
sometimes people have very basic, if you will, estates. They may have just a house, a car, maybe a few dollars in the bank, and they're like, to my kids, but I want to trust because I don't want them stuck in court dealing with this.
Now, will that house or car automatically move if you still owe debt on it? Because I know some people have questions about that.
Yeah, so you take it subject to whatever debt is still on there. So when you inherit a house, no different. If you inherit it under a will or you inherit it under a trust, you take it subject to whatever debt is there.
So going back to my hypothetical of $10,000, because I want to make sure people understand my $10,000, and I've got children who are 15, 16, 10 years old even. Can I make it so that they're going to get a certain amount of money? You talked about Prince Harry. Can I make it where they are going to get a certain amount of money, whether that's $1,000 or $2,000 every year or every 5 years? Do I have the ability to be very specific in that way if I'm dealing with a trust versus a will, or are they the same?
No, absolutely. So under a trust, you get the flexibility of being able to put strings on the funds. Especially you mentioned minors. So people always be like, well, I'm just going to leave something for my grandbaby or I'm going to leave this to my kids. In the state of Georgia, minors can't inherit. So when you say, okay, well, I'll just leave it to my grandbaby, well, they're going to end up in court. That is a surefire way for them to end up in probate court. But under a trust, you can say for my grandbaby when she turns 25, for my grandbaby when she goes off to college, or if she wants money to buy her first home. So what clients often do is take that $10,000 because they want to leave it to their 7-year-old or whatever. They use it and put it in an investment account so that it will grow and turn into more than 10,000. The hope is it won't be $10,000 10 years from now.
It's going to be more.
So it will grow, and that account, whatever brokerage or money market account you put it in, is owned by the trust owns that account. And so when that child becomes of age, that trustee, the person you put in charge of that trust, will then use that funds and be able to either give them monthly, yearly, major milestones, whatever you've put in the directions as to when they should get that money.
So we've talked about like the executor and we talked about the trustee, and how does somebody pick this person? Because I've got 3 sisters, I've got 2 brothers, and I've got an aunt who's like a mom to me, and I don't know who to pick. How do I pick that person that I know is going to do as I'm asking them to do, and can I change that person later?
You can change the person later under a will or under a trust. Under a will, it is the executor, and under a trust, it's called the trustee. You would just do an update or what's called a caveat to that will. And then under the trust, we do what's called an amendment, but we can always change that person. But I tell people when they're picking that person, think of the person that you know is responsible, that is going to absolutely follow the letter of the law in terms of what you've put in those documents. So you want to really take the time to think about who will honor my wishes, who will say at the end of the day, this is what Dene wants, and I'm going to exactly do that. Um, with trust, you always, when you put somebody else in charge of your stuff, you always run into the possibility that they won't honor your wishes or they won't do what you want. But a trustee is under what's called a fiduciary duty, as is an executor. And so all that means is they're under a heightened duty to do the things that has been asked of them. And there are ramifications if they don't follow through. So they could be sued by the beneficiaries or under both the will or the trust. If they see, like, my mom said that she was supposed to leave me $10,000, but you keep going to Vegas, they can take you to court on that. They're going to ask for an accounting. They're going to want to see where the money is, and they're going to want full transparency.
Have you watched Steve Harvey Judge show yet?
I have not.
Oh my goodness.
It doesn't sit with my spirit because I'm like, I went to law school, got all these student loans, and you
I
just
mean, he told somebody once, you must think this is real court. This ain't
oh,
real court. So he in no way.
okay.
It is pure comedic relief. But it's so funny that you mentioned going to Vegas because that actually happened. That was one of the situations where somebody passed away. It was their brother, and one sister gave the other sister like $6,000, right? And then the sister who was in charge cremated the brother. Cremation only costs you a couple of hundred, maybe 2,000. It's not that much, right? But she gathered 14 or so $1,000 from everybody in the family, and she got her a BBL.
Oh, well, I don't.
Mm-hmm.
But I use these examples when I talk about running off to Vegas because it's what I do all day. So I have a million stories. So these are actual
These
real
are
things.
actual stories.
I we wrapped up on a case where one of the daughters, one of the heirs, she was in charge of the estate. Jimmy Choo, trips to Vegas, Prada, Gucci, like she had a
Didn't do
field day.
that. But you
Well, thankfully, because the court required her to do a bond, so we were able to get the bond company involved and able to get some of the funds put back. But it happens. Like it's the world that we live in, but there are some safeguards in place to make sure that stuff like that doesn't happen.
people change too. People
And so you
change.
definitely want to keep that in mind as you go through life. These documents, I tell people all the time, this is not a one and done. Don't just say, oh, ooh, I got that done. Thank you, Jesus, and throw it in a drawer. Because life keeps happening. And so you want to make sure that your documents follow your life. They are perfect and follow your plan to the T on the day they were created. The very next day, not so much. Because in 3 to 5 years, you could get a divorce, you could adopt a child, you could get remarried, you could hit the lottery, you could lose it all.
Yeah.
All of that can happen in the span of 5 years. Easily.
Easily, very easily. Life changes. I mean, I think the last 2 years showed us that life changes,
Right.
right? Unexpectedly, you're sitting at home for months on end. Life changes. So you said throw it in a drawer. Can I write my own will?
Oh,
Should I
Jesus.
write my own will?
Listen, I tell people there's plenty of templates on the internet. There's all kinds of other companies, I won't name them,
We
that
won't
you can
name
pay
them.
whatever, $68, and they'll give you a little template or whatever. You get what you pay for. And when you draft it yourself, the courts will see it and they will assume that you knew what you was doing because you took on the responsibility of doing that. So you better hope you did it right. Because the reality is if you drafted your own will, you won't know you did it wrong because you'll be dead. Your family will be left dealing with the fallout and the drama from the fact that you did it incorrectly. I'll give you a great example. We had a young man and he really wanted us to represent him, and we was just like, I don't know what we can do for you. His grandmother had him draft her will.
Mm-hmm.
He was supposed to give half to himself and half to his aunt. Well, after grandma died, they looked at the will. Now they in court. He wrote himself out of the will. He gave everything to his aunt because he didn't know what he was doing and he didn't know what those terms meant.
Well, all
Now
righty.
you want me to go in front of a judge and be like, he's sorry, he
He
didn't know
didn't mean it.
he didn't mean it.
He didn't mean it.
And of course, his aunt, she got short-term memory. So she was like, no, it looks right to
I
me.
think he meant that. I think he meant
Everything to me.
like, no, this is good. This is good.
Yeah.
So we have a question. If I currently have a will to avoid my children having to go to court, I need to put everything in trust.
Yes and no. Trust will absolutely, and I shouldn't say absolute. There's no absolutes in the law, but trust will reduce the likelihood that they will end up in court. Now, a lot of times when we do a trust, again, if you never update that trust and then you go out and you buy all this other property that you never actually put in the trust, they could still very much end up back in court. So that's
Because we
why
still have to probate those things
those
that
things.
weren't included.
Exactly. So
Okay.
that's why I said kind of, sort of. But yes, the trust is a vehicle to help you avoid court. And depending on what your assets are, though, there may be other things that you can do to avoid court as well. So it really is case by case. So, for example, if you lived in an apartment, you got a bunch of bank accounts, but you have, pay on death and transfer on death on those bank accounts.
Mhm.
You have a life insurance policy. You've already done the beneficiary forms on there.
Mhm.
Well, then there's nothing really required to go to court on, because you've done what needs to be done on the front end to make sure those pass without having to go through court. So there are times when your estate may not need to be probated.
Okay. So what if I have a trust and this person passes away? Do I still need to get the death certificate first?
For the person, the trustee or the grantor?
For
Who
the
passed?
trustee.
The trustee. So you, I
Wait, let me
think,
make sure my question is correct.
mhm.
If I pass away and I have a trust, does my trustee need my death certificate in order to now act on my behalf?
Not necessarily. Usually it's good to have though, because they need to show like this is why I'm stepping up and now taking over. Because most times when we draft a trust, a revocable trust, you created the trust as the grantor, but you normally serve as the first trustee. And it's only after your passing does somebody else take over for you. So yeah, by the time they're ready to take over, proof of why they're now taking over the trust. And it doesn't have to be death, it could be incapacity. So that allows somebody to manage your finances and everything and the things in the trust if you
Mhm.
had a stroke or dementia or anything like that. So that's also another benefit of the trust is you already got somebody in place that's going to handle everything in the event you just can't.
Okay. Let's see. I'm just gonna read the question because I don't want to mess it up. And this person is on from LinkedIn. I have things written within a will to me, and I am not legally married. We are both legally divorced from others. Is it best for me to protect what is supposed to be willed to me, to get a trust to protect the will that they had drawn up? And that may be complicated and might require a consult. I don't know. You tell me.
So no, I think I'm following. So there are things that will
Yeah.
be willed to you. The owner of those things needs to be the one to create the trust. So whoever the person is that willed it to you
Mm-hmm.
needs to say, I need to go and see about actually making sure that at the end of the day, the things will pass to you. So you couldn't come to me and say, my I'm just gonna say boyfriend. My boyfriend is gonna leave me his house. Can you draft his will for me? No, because he is the one that will have to make the appointment and come sit in front of me as the owner of the house. It's his desire to leave it to you.
They said yes. That's what they were trying to say.
Okay,
So,
I got it.
awesome. So, and they said thank you.
You're welcome.
So, I know you guys do wills and trusts and all that kind of good stuff, but you also focus on elder law. What does that mean?
So, elder law is an area of law that serves a specific population of the community. So, anybody what over 18 can get married. So you can have anybody coming in for divorce or custody or whatever. Well, my focus is anyone really over 65 and above. What we have found is estate planning for older individuals looks very different because at 18 you might just have a car, you rent an apartment, you haven't really amassed a whole lot of assets. So your estate planning is kind of so. By 30, 40, you're thinking about planning for young kids, making sure that if something happened to you, they would be taken care of. So you're thinking about guardianships for them. But by 65, maybe you've sold a business, now you're getting sick, maybe you're starting to show signs of dementia. And so you need to make sure that your planning takes into consideration your healthcare needs in the event that you needed public assistance, in the event you needed to go into a nursing home or you needed some type of assisted living facility. Like, who would pay for that? So, elder law looks at what you have in terms of assets that you've amassed and what you, if if there is an emergency or if there is a sickness, how would those assets play out in paying for that as well, in addition to your desire to maybe leave something for the next generation. So we want to take all of that into consideration when we make a plan for where these assets will go.
Do you guys also, and not just on the elder law side, but on the estate planning in general side, do you also help with, advanced directives for healthcare and all of those medical documents that are necessary?
Yes, so we very rarely do just a will in a vacuum or a trust in a vacuum, because it's no good to have a will for when you drop dead, but there's no documents in place for when you get sick or for who's going to make those medical decisions for you. So we always try to do a comprehensive plan that includes either a will or trust or both, the financial power of attorney, as well as the healthcare documents.
And so I know you and I were talking about this, and I'm going to try to wrap it up. I know we're kind of like pushing on our time.
Okay.
So I'm 38 years old. My mom is, let's say, 60 years old. And I've been trying to tell them they need to get their stuff together. Like, get your stuff together, get your stuff together. Have you come up with anything that you can tell that person, tell their parent, or do you have something on your website or someplace that they can go to and say, look, this is why I want to show you this video. I want to show you this document because this is real, other than this video, right? That you can give to them whenever you want.
So that's
what do you have? What can they say? What can they?
We get that a lot. We get a lot of times it's the children that call our office and be like, my mom, even me rushing to do this with you, I was leaving a consultation where I had talked to the daughter like a year ago, and she's like, my dad won't move on this. He will not move on this. And then she finally brought him in to see me today, and he taking notes, and she was like, I've been telling him this. It's just the way it is. Because there's a lot going on psychologically, and I could get into all the sciences and everything about that because I'm a super nerd. But you have to understand that they have been in the parental role your whole life. And so now it's a shifting of those roles, and it's difficult for people to make that transition, because now it's that feeling of my child knows more than me. Sometimes people are dealing with that.
I try to do that.
Guilty. Yeah. And so that will hinder them from doing it. But I do have a podcast called Black Parents Aging. And this is, literally what we talk about on the entire show. It's like tips and tricks on how to talk to your parents about this stuff. Everything from their finances to their health, because we see a lot of times the kids don't know. And especially in certain communities of color, parents tend to be private. Like older parents, stay out of my business. That's what I heard growing up. So, so you have to kind of go at it at different angles, and you have to kind of really put on kid gloves, and you got to come at them at different times. And I tell people, it's not like a sit down at the Thanksgiving table and be like, okay, mama, tell me all your business. I need to know where the bank account. No, you cannot do that. Do not do that. It will not go well for you.
Or like my mom tells me, I'm grown.
Yes.
I'm grown, ma'am.
Yes.
And I just be like, and
so I encourage people, if they have family members that they know they need to kind of start having these conversations with, to check out the podcast, get the tips and tricks. You go to our website for the law firm. There's also a place for you to put in your information, and you'll get videos. And the videos are really just kind of small segments to explain to you what the different documents are, how they work together, how does that overplay with elder law. So those are probably the two resources that I encourage almost everyone to check out.
Where can they find the podcast?
The podcast is everywhere. So you can go on Apple, you can go on Google Podcasts, pretty much anywhere people listen to podcasts nowadays, it's there.
Check it out. Black Parents Aging. And if you are white or Asian or Hispanic or whatever, you check it out too.
Yeah, too. The information is not necessarily racially specific.
It is not.
Here some humor because all I know is Black parents because that's what I have. So, it comes from that place. It's what I know.
Exactly. So no, it is for everybody. But it's called Black Parents Aging. Make sure that you check it out. It is awesome. And then the website, is that right? srlawgrp.com. And like she said, they have tons of resources there, videos that you can watch, all of those things. And obviously, of course, call Nicola. Call SR Law Group. They will be there for you. Metro Atlanta, particularly Douglasville. Are y'all accepting virtual consultations or is it just in person?
No, it's virtual. And it's amazing because we have clients from all over the state. I'm just like, you came from Athens or you came from Augusta. And I'm like, you passed like a million lawyers to get here. But they find us, they love our vibe and they want to come and work with us. But
what is the vibe? What's the vibe?
I love what I do. I genuinely do. So I kind of nerd out on it. But I think that estate planning is for the living. I don't look at it as morbid. I don't look at it as death. It's one of those things you do because you want your family to feel comfort and peace of mind. And then you can go about the business of living your life because you've already taken care of this.
Yeah.
So, we can't control what's going to happen out here. But what a peace of mind it is to be like, if I want to play frog in the street right now, I know my family is going to be good. If I want to YOLO and decide to go bungee jump, my family is good.
I won't do
that. That's how I look at it. And so for that reason, it's usually very positive. It's a lot more fun. I do all these like scenarios. I'm always like killing off people or sending people to jail. People be like, "Dang, you killed me off last time." I'd be like, "It's fair. It's equal opportunity here." But yeah, I try to keep it upbeat and I try to keep it as positive as possible because again, like I said, it's not meant to be sad and it's not meant to be morbid at all.
It's a protection measure.
It is. I mean, I think
security, mentally, everything.
Certain things we do now that we don't necessarily love or want to do, but we get it done. Like taxes. Listen, it's tax season. You just get it done. You go out here, you get your oil changed because you want to make sure that's working and it's in shape for when you get behind the wheel. So it's the same thing. It's making sure that you have stuff in place so everything is good.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Let me make sure I don't have any more questions. I don't think I do. Feel free, like I said, to reach out to Nicola, SR Law Group. And they'll be more than happy to take care of y'all. I am sure of it. Thank you, Nicola, for joining us this evening. I greatly appreciate it. I'm sure that our audience greatly appreciated you. And thank you so very much.
Bye, guys. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you guys for joining us on another episode of Conversations with Dene, your family law and wellness needs. I want to make sure that y'all follow the Dunn Matthews Law Firm on all of our social media platforms. We are on Instagram and Facebook, YouTube at D Matthews Firm, and on Facebook at Dunn Matthews Firm. Our website, www.dunnmatthewsfirm.com, where you can find informationals, videos, the podcast. If you didn't catch the entirety of it and you want to go back and look at some pieces, it's on all of those platforms and available to you every single month. Next month, April, we will be talking about our children and why it's important for them to be active, involved in extracurricular activities as we reach coming into the summer months, working, all of those types of things. And we have a very special guest for next month, one of my very, very longtime friends who literally has been doing this since we were in high school. And so he knows all there is to know about young children, our youth, how important it is for them to be involved, and how to help you guys navigate that thought process and what your children should and should not be doing. So again, I'm Dene Matthews of the Dunn Matthews Law Firm, and we want to thank you guys for tuning in tonight. Have a good one.